What's up, everybody? How's everybody doing? I hope that everybody had a fabulous day. I did. Had a great day. So what is your lesson for the day? What did you learn today? For me, what I learned, what I take away from the day, is that it's okay for you to sometimes question whether you're doing a good job or not. I think that if we, it's all right to have confidence, but I think that if we get just, a little too cocky with knowing our capabilities or feeling like we got this and we don't ever question whether we're doing a good job or whether our superiors are of the opinion that we're doing a good job, then we can kind of be a little high-minded and think a little too much of ourselves. And then if we make a mistake, it can be a little bit of a letdown. So I think that feeling like you have periodically questioned how well you're performing provides an opportunity for you to self-evaluate and also to look for areas of improvement, because none of us are perfect. We all have things that we need to work on. Even if we know our job to the best of our ability, we can never know everything. There are going to be times when we know our job extremely well, but we can always learn more. So for me, that is an area that I struggle with, not that I don't know my job or anything like that, but just questioning, whether am I doing the best that I can do? And so, I guess that's not really a struggle. It's something I do. I reflect quite often, as a matter of fact, because, I want to be the best person that I can be. I want to be the best employee I can be. I want to be the best mother, the best wife. I want to be the best at everything that I do. In every role that I'm in, I want to perform at peak for as long and as often as I can. I know that some days, we'll have good days, we'll have bad days, things like that. But as long as we're striving to do the best that we can, that's all that anybody can ever ask of us. And it may not be their best, but as long as it's our best, then that's all that matters. Because you cannot allow people to put their perception of what's good or bad off on you, And so that's what I took away from today, because I want to make sure that I'm always doing the best that I can. So this morning, I kind of talked to you all about, doing story time, and, I have a lot of different life lessons and things like that I like to share. And so I thought I still want to wait and see what you guys think, but I thought I would share a story with you all. And this actually falls in line with a natural disaster. We just went through Harvey, and then Irma, came ashore, and Jose is behind her, and then we have Katia somewhere out there tearing up stuff. So it's not a story about a hurricane, but it is a story about a natural disaster. So in 1989, my husband and I met, and when I release, if I haven't already released the story about our story time about how we met, you'll hear that. We met in March of 1989, and our courtship was pretty quick. We just kind of knew after a short period of time that we wanted to be together, and so we got married. Well, at some point, because my husband was in the military, he was in the Navy, and he was on a ship that obviously when you're on a ship, it goes in and out of port, and you do what's called a Westpac, which is a 6-month cruise, or you do a world cruise, which is 9 months. And periodically you went out for maneuvers, which could be anywhere from, say, 3 days to 2 weeks. So I don't recollect exactly. I have to look up the actual month that this happened, but at some point in 1989, my husband was out on maneuvers, and they weren't gone very far. They actually were out near the Golden Gate Bridge, which is, everybody knows, that's the bridge that connects San Francisco to Oakland. And I was born in Oakland. I moved here to Houston when I was 8 years old. And so anyway, I went to Texas Southern University here in Houston for my freshman year of college, and I left with the intention of going to San Diego State University, and that's a whole nother story time, but you know the reason I went. But that was the intention, is to leave Houston and complete my college education at San Diego State University. So I got there, and that situation didn't work out because I was actually supposed to be, I was moving there with to live with a family member at their request. And like I said, I'll get into all of that another story time. Well, that didn't work out because there was some abuse going on, and I couldn't stay there. It was a lot of negative things that were happening. I was young, and it was actually impacting my performance in school. And I was also working full-time, and I, stayed away from the house where I lived regularly, and I had my own money regularly because of everything that was going on. At any rate, long story short, I called my grandmother, told her what was going on, and she said, well, it doesn't make any sense for you to go all the way back to Texas because you're right here in California. Why don't you just come on home? So I did. In November of 1988, I graduated from high school in 1987. So I did my freshman year, 87 to 88. So the summer of 88, I moved to San Diego. So anyway, this is right after Thanksgiving in 1988. I moved back to Oakland, and I met my husband in March of 89. So what happened was, my grandmother told me, just come on back here. So I stayed with my grandmother for a little while. And then when I met my husband, he's now my husband, he and I were spending a lot of time together, and I was already saving up money because I was used to living on my own. I was already saving up money. I started working for the Alameda Contra Costa Medical Association, the blood bank. And so I was making good money, especially for somebody my age at the time. I was making good money, and I was saving up money to get my own place. Well, when I met my husband, who at that time was my boyfriend, we had this really fast whirlwind romance. I was just so taken with him, and we just could not see ourselves being separated. So when he was out on maneuvers one time, I used to always go to the port when they came back in. I had candy and stuffed animals and a big old banner and balloons, and I always was ready for him to come home. So when he was out on maneuvers this one time, I decided that I was going to trick him, and I went ahead and I got my apartment, and I got my apartment. Oh, I want to be in this lane. And I surprised him. I shouldn't say trick him, but I surprised him when he came back into town because, oh shoot, now it's open. When he came back into town, because I made him think that the apartment wasn't, that it was a friend of mine, and she said that we could stay there, or whatever. So then I told him once we got to the apartment that was our place. So we started living together. Well, like I said, him being in the military, we were in and out. He was in and out. And so now we're living together. And at one point, he went back out on maneuvers. And while he was out, there was this massive, massive earthquake. I was at work, and by this time, I'm no longer working at the Alameda Contra Costa Medical Association. I'm now working for a pregnancy consultation center, which is a clinic. It's a clinic for it's like family medicine. I was a birth control counselor at the time, and so this is a building. The clinic was in a building that took up three stories. So I was on the first. This particular day, I was watching the front desk because the receptionist, the person. There's two receptionists, and there was two because when one had to go to lunch, then the other one covered, and so on and so forth. Well, one of the receptionists was out. So on this particular day, instead of me doing birth control counseling, I was downstairs. So right around the time that we normally have an elevator. So right around the time that we were about to close, all of a sudden, this building that we were in started moving like in this really weird motion, and we were sitting there like, oh my God, what the heck is going on? And so the girl that was with me, she had lived in Oakland all her life. She had been through earthquakes and all this other kind of stuff. She started screaming and hollering, and I'm like, girl, if you don't shut up. And I grabbed her and I pushed her underneath the desk. So we're under the desk waiting for this thing to pass. And so the funny thing is, at the time that the earthquake hit, we were literally about to walk out because the clinic had glass doors. We were about to walk out of the glass doors, lock everything up, and then take the elevator upstairs because we had to go upstairs to clock out. So we're standing there, and I'm grabbing her and pushing her underneath the desk. And so when she finally stopped screaming, I was like, I thought you said that, that you been here all your life and you have been through earthquakes and all that kind of stuff. And she's looking at me all crazy, and I'm like, boo-boo, you need to stop with all of that. So we got out from under the desk after everything was over. We locked. I told her, I said, I'm not going to clock out. I'll tell George tomorrow what time we left, and I'm sure he'll understand because you're not about to get me. I'm claustrophobic. Let me put that in there. I was like, I'll just tell George and he'll understand because I'm not about to get in that elevator and then be stuck in the elevator because of this earthquake. So she was like, me too, I'm going home. So I lived two blocks over and 3 blocks up from where I was now working. When I worked for the blood bank, I just lived 3 blocks up the opposite direction. So here we are, we're locking up, we're headed home. I get to my apartment complex, and this is an apartment complex where the actual units are built around a courtyard. So no matter what level you're on, first, second, third, or fourth, when you look over the banister, you're looking over an open area where they have benches and places to sit and stuff like that. And it was really, really pretty. So I'm on the second floor. When I get there, I see all like the residents scattered, and they're like, did you feel the earthquake? Did you feel the earthquake? I'm like, yeah, I felt the earthquake, and I'm looking and I see other residents because our property manager actually lived on the same floor that I did at the opposite end of the walkway. And so I see a lot of people standing around the outside of his apartment. So I go into my apartment. Everything is just knocked over. The TV is on the floor. Furniture is moved. It was just a hot mess. Stuff was everywhere. And that's how strong the earthquake was. So I put my stuff down, and I kept, I didn't have any electricity. It was just crazy. So I put my stuff down and I went down the walkway, and I was trying to see what everybody was looking at. Well, he seemed to be the only one that had electricity, and he had the news on, and the news was talking about how strong the earthquake was and what happened. Whereas it turns out we have a freeway down the streets. I want to say had to be about maybe 10 blocks from our complex. No, it was less than that. But anyway, it was down the street from our complex, and it's called the Cypress structure, the Cypress Freeway. And it was a double-decker freeway. So it was, imagine your regular interstate, but it had, where you can travel either on the top or you can travel on the bottom. And for some, I don't know why they designed that interstate like that. But you were traveling the same direction. It had the same exits and everything, but for some reason it was double-decker. Well, the Cypress Freeway had collapsed, and it was during rush hour traffic. It was so many people on that freeway when this earthquake hit. so many people got killed because the cypress structure literally pancaked. And the people that were on, obviously it was people that got hurt and killed that was on the top, but there were people that died because they were sandwiched in between the freeway. And it was just so devastating. And on top of that, the Golden Gate Bridge had severe damage to it, so some people lost their lives there as well. And it was just a mess. It was so devastating later on to find out exactly, how many people passed away and exactly what all happened. And so my uncle, who lives here, my dad's brother, worked at the time, he worked for Old Shan Demolition Company. They flew him and a team of people in because they were experienced in I think it's called strategic demolition, which basically means they can blow up a building and they know how to position the explosives so the building would just fall completely down as opposed to over. So they had to bring them in because they knew how to deconstruct the Cypress Freeway without creating additional devastation. Because keep in mind, even though this earthquake happened and people passed away, they were still finding people alive that were on that lower level of the freeway when it collapsed. So they were brought in because it was imperative that they deconstructed this freeway in a way that would not further harm the people that were being found alive. Anyway, so that's basically what happened. And when this earthquake happened, my husband had already found out that his ship was being stationed in Bremerton, Washington, because they were going to what's called the shipyard. And because the ship, needed repairs, it was being overhauled and things like that. And so we were already preparing. That was another reason we went ahead and got married, because my whole thing is I wasn't going with him if I wasn't his wife. I had no family there. I was not traveling from California to Washington State. And I couldn't do that. That just didn't make sense to me. So, and he did not want to leave without me. So the only other option was for us to get married. We were already planning to get married, but the only other option was for us to go ahead and get married at that time so that we can get everything moved and all that stuff. So at this time, that's when all this stuff happened. We were already planning to move. And I was just completely devastated at the loss for the city, because so many people lost their lives. And, this is one of the worst earthquakes in the history of the city, maybe in the history of the state. And you can find information about it. The earthquake happened in 1989. And I actually did some research on it not too long ago. And I think it was when I was in school, because you're talking about the psychological impact that something has on, families and people, who live in the city, when something like this happens. How do you recover from stuff like that? And so I learned that, they rebuilt that portion of the Cypress Freeway, but they didn't rebuild it the way that it was originally constructed. It was, completely redesigned, and they talked about some of the negative impact that rebuilding this freeway was gonna have, because as it turns out, it was going through a portion of the city that was taking land from underprivileged people. So yeah, look it up. That's my story time for today. It wasn't something that was, ha funny and things like that, but it's definitely I think that it's interesting information, because you hear about stuff happening in history, and here I lived through one of the worst earthquakes in the history of the city and possibly the state. So you can, like I said, you can go ahead and check it out and stuff like that, and look at, if you Google it, you'll definitely find information on it. It was 1989, and it was in Oakland, the Oakland, San Francisco Bay Area. I lived in Oakland, California, and you'll find all the information, everything on it. So that's my story time for today. I thank God for protecting me, because I could have been in a situation where the building failed or something like that, and I wouldn't be here today, or I would be here and would be physically handicapped or something like that. So all of my stories are not going to be this heavy, but for some reason, I guess because I thought about the devastation that Hurricane Harvey, Irma, Jose, and Katia, and I thought about the devastation that these storms has created in people's lives. And so I just thought I would share another story about how natural disasters have a tendency to touch people and things like that. So anyway, I just wanted to come and share that with you, and that's probably going to do it for me for today. So as usual, I will say, love yourself, love somebody else. Take care until next time. Bye bye.